Okay, verbal abuse, and this is very similar to the emotional abuse tree because very often they are one and the same thing. So what we said in the emotional abuse applies. This is the other chart where it does matter if it's resident to resident interaction. It does matter that the resident is cognitively impaired or not. If they're cognitively impaired and can't appreciate, then it's a behavior management that the home should be addressing. But let's walk through, for the sake of the exercise, remembering this parallel, always ever present, and in fact maybe even first process about take action and respond and start to investigate. Are there reasonable grounds to suspect verbal abuse? Is witnessed verbal abuse of a resident? And I get kind of tired of, going to staff events and such where staff say, well, what about when we're verbally abused by the resident? Well, you work there and you understand that people have specific needs and, there are different ways of dealing with that. But it's not in the legislation as verbal abuse. The legislation is built for the protection of the residents. This is the whodunit. Was it a resident and the verbal communication that is threatening or intimidating? So I'm going to punch you if you don't get out of my way. Threatening, intimidating.
What about mimicking and mocking? Would that be considered?
Could. Okay, now listen. We're on the whodunit. So we're on the because we will come to that because that's another part of the whodunit column. So this part it's a resident. So we're saying yes, it's a resident who did this, and it's threatening or intimidating. Yes, resident to resident. Did it lead another resident to fear for their safety? Same really as the emotional abuse. If that resident it was addressed to, just let it roll off their back, then it's a non-issue. However, if it frightened all the other people in the lounge or in the hallway or whatever, then those other residents are really people who are affected. Let's say, yes, it did scare somebody. And did the resident who made the comment, were they capable? Again, if it's no, they're not capable of understanding, then it's a behavior issue that the home needs to be dealing with. And there are other pieces of the legislation that talk about what they need to do there, but it doesn't fit under the reporting under verbal abuse. Let's back up down the whodunit because this is your question. Naomi, thank you. It wasn't a resident who made the verbal comment. Was it somebody else? Remember, expectation of behavior is higher if it's not a resident. So it's the first part the same. Was it threatening or intimidating nature? So if the answer to that is yes, then again, and there are no, was the staff member cognitively aware? One would hope so, to the reporting. But here's the other piece. This is the higher expectation piece. No, it wasn't threatening or intimidating, so I might not be a staff member who says, I'm going to put you in your room for the rest of the night if you don't quiet down, or I'm going to hit you or something. No. What I do is mock, intimidate, mama, 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 look at she's crying, or I'm going to take away your dolly, or, then that would be a verbal communication that's belittling, degrading, diminishes the resident's sense of well-being, dignity, or self-worth. That definitely, and so a staff member doing that or anybody who's not a resident doing that fits under the definition. It's verbally abusive, and that would be reported. So very good question. Thank you for saying that. That's exactly a picture of what it would be.
So if a staff member is talking about a family member and the resident can understand but cannot communicate, that would be a type of abuse, wouldn't it?
That's an interesting one because it kind of depends on the impact on the resident because remember it's verbal abuse of a resident. So it might not be a proper behavior. It might not be professional behavior, but it might not be considered verbal abuse of a resident.
It's hurting the family member.
I think it's a code of conduct issue.
Yes, good point. Good point. Okay, because the legislation is about abuse of a resident. So not resident's family, but resident. But hopefully there are other avenues, other ways to take that concern forward. Just so you know how it was distributed, and the expectation that everybody knows about it is that the package, we thought it was important enough that we again violated our green initiative and did a printed package in the mail to every long-term care home and licensee in the province of Ontario. We also put it on longtermcarehomes.net, which is the communication website, and I always took this chance when I was talking to the sector to be saying to people, you need to go on that site on a regular basis, because that's where all of the announcements come out, and they always send a broadcast email out to all the homes to alert them to go and look, but you have to go and look home. So they're posted on longtermcarehomes.net. We are also going to be putting the slide deck that I use, which is slightly different than yours, but very similar, on longtermcarehomes.net, so homes will have ongoing access to that, as well as we are putting together a list of the questions and answers that came from all the previous sessions, and hoping to post that as well for everybody's benefit, people who weren't able. We also did provincial webinars that I'll talk about on the next slide. We worked on the ministry, we and the OPP are still collaborating on some of those guidelines about the criminal code long-term care homes, and we're trying to make it a little more plain language. Collaborative education activities, and that I was privileged to be invited to speak to a number of the sector events, full-length days that were hosted by Whodunit. And the rest of the day was, the speakers were Tammy Rankin and Robin Sanders, did a really dynamic day more about elder abuse, as well as the provincial webinars that ministry hosted, and we had over 550 people registered for that and attended. And in the Whodunit days, there were between 250 and 300 representatives of long-term care homes. So the word certainly got out. We also did the blast emails telling people to go to look at the website and the mail out. We also, of course, forwarded and copied all these same materials, the decision trees, to the advocacy groups, and so family councils, OARCAs, all of the people who also speak on behalf of residents in long-term care. So this is what happened. I won't go through all of this, but just to reassure you that we did extensive training with our own inspectors so that they had a fulsome understanding, and the review and refresh of that still goes on at their monthly SAO team managers, who then kind of use some individual situations that were problematic that came in to talk over as a learning tool, and to monitor consistency. And we in the ministry have an electronic folder, like a SharePoint kind of folder, that's a resource reference. So externally, we did the postings, and we had the number of speaking engagements, which was great, and the provincial webinars and teleconferences. That's a basic schedule, and here you are, right here, with the varied kind of audience that was reached. So I want to thank you a lot, because probably it's hard sometimes to bring a very kind of bureaucratic vehicle, tool, a form sort of thing into and talk about it in any way that is interesting and meaningful to people. So I certainly hope, though, that having your understanding of this enhances your awareness and hopefully reassures you to keep doing what you believe is right.